Welcome to the basic lesson on the archetype matrix. This lesson introduces the foundation that supports every program we offer, both in retreats and in our online education. Think of it as the alphabet of self-understanding. Once you learn it, you'll be able to use it across all of our trainings and in your everyday life. By working with the archetype matrix, you will begin to see the deeper needs behind your actions, words, and feelings, recognize yourself more clearly, and therefore manage yourself more wisely. Understand which strategies help you and which ones hold you back. Uncover your inner conflicts and notice where your energy is drained or renewed. This framework is based on the work of Carol Pearson and developmental psychology. It is the core operating system of your mind and the foundation for all your future learning with us. Now let's explore what the archetype matrix really is. Imagine that you are the operator of a computer. Into its memory, information is constantly being recorded. Strategies you use in your life to meet your needs. This information includes both your individual conscious and unconscious patterns, but it also downloads files from the larger shared network, what psychology calls the collective unconscious. All these files are organized into 12 folders. Each folder represents a set of human needs and the typical strategies for fulfilling them. Together, they form the archetype matrix, a structured way of understanding how you operate, why you choose certain behaviors, and how you can transform them. Every time something happens in your life, you, as the operator, go back to your computer to choose the file you need. But here's the challenge. If you don't understand how these files are organized on your hard drive, or which file would serve you best in this situation, you will act out of habit. You will simply open the files that lie closest at hand, or the ones that feel most familiar. That means you often repeat old strategies, even when they no longer work. Personal development with the archetype matrix changes this. It helps you recognize which old strategies are outdated and no longer useful, and consciously form new, more effective strategies to meet your needs. Instead of running on autopilot, you gain the ability to choose with awareness, using the right file at the right time. Each folder of files represents one of the 12 archetypal images, first introduced by Carol Pearson in her book Awakening the Heroes Within. Later, this theory was expanded in her other works, such as The Hero and the Outlaw and What Story Are You Living? It is important to note that some archetypal images have appeared under different names in different contexts. That is why, as we go deeper into how these archetypes form in our consciousness, I will mention the different naming variations and explain which version we will use in the archetype matrix and why. Let's look deeper into the archetype matrix and the connections between all archetypes. And let's begin at the very beginning, birth. When a child is born, they inspire awe and unconditional love. At this stage, they expect their needs to be met by others. This is the innocent archetype. The innocent longs to live in a paradise created by those around it. But when that paradise is broken, the innocent blames the world. I'm good, you're bad. This world is wrong. This is our first psychological imprint of unmet need. In her latest book, What Stories Are You Living?, Carol Pearson calls this archetype the idealist. However, in the archetype matrix, we will use the name the innocent because it more vividly conveys the image of a small child. From our very birthright to be happy comes our first fundamental need, which Pearson in The Hero and the Outlaw described as the yearning for paradise. Next comes the hero warrior, In nearly all of her books, Carol Pearson refers to this archetype as the warrior. However, in the book The Hero and the Outlaw, which she co-authored with Margaret Mark, the same archetype is called the hero. To reflect both traditions in the archetype matrix, we use the combined name hero-warrior. This is important because this archetype is not only about protection, it is also about recognition. At this stage of development, the child begins to model themselves after adults, seeking their praise and approval. They want to prove themselves by showing their achievements and saying, in essence, "Look what I've accomplished." This marks the emergence of our next fundamental need, described by Pearson as leaving a thumbprint on the world. Then arises the need to belong. In The Hero and the Outlaw, this archetype is called the regular guy/gal, and that is the term we will use in the archetype matrix, because it best reflects the desire at the core, to be normal, to fit in, to be accepted by the group. In her earlier works, Carol Pearson referred to this image as the orphan. This name points to the greatest fear of this archetype, to be abandoned, to be excluded from the tribe. In her later book, What Story Are You Living?, she also used the term the realist. Here in the matrix, we emphasize the yearning for belonging rather than the fear of rejection. At this stage of development, a child does not yet create deep, authentic bonds. Instead, they learn to form many surface-level connections, a survival strategy to adapt and avoid being left out. The regular guy/gal often thinks, "I want to be normal." And it is here that many limiting beliefs take root. I'm not normal if... This stage gives rise to our third fundamental need, described by Pearson as the desire to connect, interact, and belong. Next comes the caregiver. At this stage, a child sees their parent or another adult caring for others and begins to mimic that behavior, comforting toys, helping at home, or looking after younger siblings. Through these actions, the child learns that caring can bring recognition and meaning. The caregiver's desire is to create comfort and safety for another person or for a group, most often the family. In adulthood, however, this archetype can take an unhealthy turn. The instinct to help may slide into self-neglect or even codependency, always prioritizing others' needs while ignoring one's own. This stage shapes our fourth fundamental need, described by Pearson as providing structure to the world. These four early archetypes, if not integrated, create adult problems, often described through Karpman's drama triangle. But we don't kill these archetypes. Instead, we bring them into our heart. They are part of our inner child. A healthy adult learns to satisfy these junior needs internally, rather than depending on others to do it for them. These are our archetypes of adaptation. They represent the first strategies imprinted in our consciousness, and they will always be the ones we turn to automatically in moments of stress or when facing new circumstances. Where childhood carried more trauma, those early strategies will seem the most natural and safe, simply because they once worked as survival tools. And it's important to understand they are not good or bad. They are adaptive. For example, when we move to a new place, we instinctively rely on the regular guy/gal strategy, trying to form new connections and fit in. When we start a new job, we may switch on the hero-warrior strategy, showing what we can do so the boss will notice us. These archetypal strategies are very useful for adaptation. But in adulthood, they will not bring lasting fulfillment. After all, children do not need money, intimacy, or the responsibilities of adult life. And so their strategies cannot guide us in work, relationships, or deeper purpose. That is why integration matters. We acknowledge the child, but we don't let the child run the office, the marriage, or the bank account. Each new archetype is born from the frustration or limitation of the one before it. Growth does not begin with success. It begins when the old ways stop working. The innocent expects to get everything they want. When the world no longer delivers, the innocent reacts, stomping, manipulating, resisting. But when nothing works, something shifts. Out of this dissatisfaction, the seeker is born. The seeker goes looking for paradise elsewhere, in new places, new jobs, new trainings, new experiences. Their power is their courage. They are not afraid to step into the unknown. In different books, Carol Pearson has also called this archetype the wanderer and the explorer. But in the archetypal matrix, we will use the name seeker because it best reflects the active drive to search for something new. Eventually, novelty itself is no longer enough. That's when the sage appears. Instead of running outward, the sage turns inward and begins to study. They ask, what are the laws of this world? What is the deeper logic behind things? Through reflection and analysis, the sage finds peace by understanding. And so, within the sector of the yearning for paradise, 3 developmental levels emerge. The innocent enjoys safe, effortless joy. The seeker looks for new ways to create joy. The sage reflects, analyzes, and builds inner peace through understanding. The hero warrior wants to be the best. They prove themselves by showing achievements, but they have no independent value system. They fight for whoever tells them to until one day they begin to question, wait, do I even believe in this? From this doubt, the rebel is born. Carol Pearson has used several names for this archetype. The destroyer, the radical aspect that tears down what no longer serves. It emphasizes endings, breaking forms, and clearing space for renewal. The outlaw, the one who refuses society's rules, a free spirit who lives outside the system. The revolutionary, the activist who fights not just against something, but for the transformation of society and the future. Each of these captures a facet of the same energy. The destroyer is breaking down what's outdated. The outlaw is defying imposed rules. The revolutionary is reshaping the collective. In the archetype matrix, we integrate all these meanings into the term the rebel. Rebel is simpler, universally understood, and alive in everyday language. It covers the full spectrum, from personal defiance to cultural revolution. It carries fewer dark or extreme associations than destroyer or outlaw, while still holding the transformative energy of the revolutionary. The rebel says, look how independent I am. But at this stage, there is often no vision yet, only rejection. The rebel fights, but not always for something. That's when the magician awakens. The magician no longer asks, who's wrong? But instead, what does this mean? They see the invisible, live in the flow, and bring not rebellion, but transformation. The hero says, look what I can do. The rebel says, look how independent I am. The magician says, watch how everything changes when I change the way I see it. This progression shows how our second fundamental need, leaving a thumbprint on the world, evolves through 3 levels of development. The hero warrior achieves recognition through action. The rebel rejects imposed systems and asserts independence. The magician transforms reality by transforming perception. The regular guy, gal, needs to fit in, but eventually they feel lonely in the crowd. From this dissatisfaction, the need for real closeness is born. And so, the lover arises, the one who sees beauty in others and seeks deep, sacred connections. But relationships can also disappoint. The lover can be hurt or betrayed. And from that pain, the jester is born. The jester still connects with the world, but on their own terms. They don't depend on reciprocity. They value freedom, humor, and irony. Their wisdom is simple yet profound. I don't need your approval to be myself. It's worth noting that in Carol Pearson's early book, Awakening the Heroes Within, this archetypal image was also called the Fool. In the Archetypal Matrix, however, we use the name the Jester, as it better conveys the archetype's playful independence and its transformative role in adult life. This archetype typically emerges only after the world has already been studied and structured, when rules are understood, but freedom is claimed nonetheless. This progression shows how our third fundamental need, the desire to connect, interact, and belong, develops through three levels. The regular guy, gal, adapts to survive, wants to fit in. The lover builds deep emotional connections, sees beauty in others. The jester connects with the world on his own terms, independent of others' opinions. The caregiver devotes themselves to helping others. But eventually, the caregiver may burn out or discover that there is no one left to care for. Out of this emptiness arises the search for self, and the creator is born. The creator longs to manifest beauty, to build new forms, and to innovate. They bring imagination and inspiration into the world, but eventually the chaos becomes overwhelming. Creations pile up without order. There is no system, no income, no sustainability. That is when the ruler enters. The ruler brings responsibility, structure, and clarity. They say, let's organize this. The ruler establishes systems and strategies. They turn chaos into order, and they lead not from ego, but from a sense of responsibility. This progression shows how our fourth fundamental need, providing structure to the world, develops through three levels. The caregiver creates safety and comfort by caring for others. The creator brings innovation, beauty, and new possibilities. The ruler organizes, sustains, and ensures lasting impact through structure. When we look at the archetype matrix as a whole, we see that each of the four core human needs can be fulfilled in different ways. The bottom row represents the adaptive archetypes, formed in childhood. Acting from these strategies, we try to satisfy our needs through other people. This is the infantile position. The top row represents the archetypes of maturity. A person with an adult mindset fulfills their needs through their own internal resources rather than depending on others. The middle row contains the transitional archetypes usually formed in adolescence. These are archetypes of action, but they have no control panel of their own. Their role depends entirely on whose leadership they are under, the adaptive archetypes or the mature archetypes. The archetype matrix is not a labeling system. It is a diagnostic and developmental tool. It helps us see what need we are trying to fulfill and how we are trying to fulfill it. As a person grows, their inner configuration shifts, the image changes, and so do the strategies. Archetypes are not something you develop. They are already inside you. What you do develop is the awareness of how to work with them. Why the matrix matters. This model allows us to view any situation in life as a developmental moment. It helps us ask, how did I get here? What's happening? What options do I have? What are the consequences of each path? Archetypal behavior is cross-cultural and universal. By identifying which archetypal strategy you're using, you can better understand your needs and choose your actions more consciously. Maturity comes when our actions begin to be governed by mature archetypes, meaning our decisions come from thinking, not from impulsive emotion of adaptive archetypes.